the first thing to address these psychological component is to look at the trauma itself, the root cause of the trauma. Now, how that can cause depression and make it worse is trauma either happens in low-level chronic levels, for example, low-level stress at your job that leads to burnout and depression, or in acute form. So, for example, you have a car crash, you get PTSD from it, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this leads to your depression. So there can be sort of acute forms and low-level chronic forms of traumatic events. Now, how do you address the trauma? Well, definitely the best way is with a therapist, with a psychologist, most likely. There's also certain solutions in spiritual circles that talk about shadow work and confronting your shadow and your trauma, which is basically it's basically similar to what psychotherapy tries to do, but in a more sort of spiritual way, you could say. So definitely this is something to look at. The second solution that I have in order to deal with the psychological components of depression is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for short. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy has been proven for years to be incredibly effective in treating depression. It's been incredibly effective, and I think people who say that it's not effective or it hasn't worked for them, I think they haven't done it consistently. I think they haven't done it consistently, or they haven't looked at the other spheres of depression, right? So if you do it in tangent with the physiological, the environmental, the spiritual, I think it can be incredibly effective, and it's been proven for years to work. Now, what I recommend, definitely the easiest way to do it is with a CBT certified psychologist, psychotherapist, or therapist. Also, what I recommend is that you do cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT journaling, which is a technique that is outlined in the book Feeling Great by David Burns, Dr. David Burns. Highly, highly recommend you read the book if you want to do this technique. But basically how you do it is that you look at the negative belief, whether it be I'm not enough, I'll never amount to anything, whatever negative belief that is at the root of your depression. You write these down. On the secondly, what you do is you identify the distortion. And there's a list of about 12 to 15 distortions. I made a video about that. I'll probably link in the description. Basically, you identify what the distortion is. And thirdly, you write down a positive reframe for that negative belief. A more realistic reframe. And the reframe first has to be true. And the second, the reframe has to crush the negative thought. So those are the two criteria in order for a reframe to be effective. So for example, let me give you an example. So for example, I tell you, I'll never amount to anything and I'm no good. Okay, what cognitive distortion is that? Well, this is all or nothing thinking, because I'm saying literally nothing in the world I can do, that I'll never amount to anything. So that's an all or nothing. There are other distortions you can try to list. For example, emotional reasoning, which basically feels that, because I feel worthless, therefore I must be worthless. So that's sort of the bias that we have. So I list those distortions, and step number 3, I write a reframe. Then what I could write, for example, is, well, I might feel like I won't amount to anything, but that's not true. I mean, I can amount to certain things. For example, I woke up this morning, I made some coffee, I set up this camera and shot a video. I mean, that's not nothing. Yes, I didn't win a Nobel Prize with my video, but I did something. So it makes no sense to say I'll never amount to anything, because clearly I do some things right, even if it's just brushing my teeth or whatever. So this is my reframe. And see, it's important when you do these, you do them on paper. All right, so this is called the 3-column technique by David Burns. So you start with you write the negative thought, you write the distortion associated with it, and you write the reframe, and then you have done CBT journaling. Now, the third aspect of dealing with the psychological component of depression is doing therapy. Of course, therapy is something that I recommend, and probably your doctor will recommend. Therapy, now you have to be careful with that, because some people, they report having done therapy for years, it hasn't really helped at all. The first type of therapy, which is more sort of talk therapy that you might get from certain social workers, for example, or people who aren't certified in, let's say, cognitive behavioral therapy or anything like that. Just talk therapy has been proven, I think, to not be as effective as other therapies. Why? Because you just kind of talk about your problems, and the psychologist or the therapist is not going to give you anything really in return, which I've found to be sort of the case. Now, what I would recommend is you go to a CBT certified practitioner or a psychologist who uses cognitive behavioral therapy in their practice. Now, me to get access to this psychologist at first who was CBT certified, he's an amazing psychologist, it cost a bit more. It was like, instead of $110 or $120 per hour, it was like about $150. So it was definitely a bit more expensive, but it was incredibly more helpful. So you might need to shop around and trying to find a really high quality psychotherapist. And what I'm gonna tell you is that if you don't resonate with a specific therapist, don't hesitate to change, because I think the methodology and the relationship you have with your therapist is really paramount to recovery in terms of depression. The fourth tool that I want to suggest you in order to deal with the psychological aspect of depression is getting into personal development and self-help. Of course, if you like my videos, you're probably into this field anyway, but definitely looking into reading more books on psychology, positive thinking, books like Tony Robbins, or whatever books on self-help, whatever aspect of your life you want to improve. Let's say relationships, take a relationships book, and by doing that, by getting more knowledge about that, you're going to improve your relationships. So definitely getting into personal development is an incredible tool to have in order to feel better in your life, feel more positive. And I wish this was more taught, maybe in school or even in depression. If people struggle with depression, no one tells them to get into self-help and personal development, which is insane. They just tell you, take a pill and go to the therapist. I think what's good with self-help is that it gives you self-governance, this sort of agency on yourself into changing your own life. So you're not letting change, be dictated by your therapist or the medication you're taking. You are proactively taking charge in your life when you get into personal development, which is why I believe it's absolutely wonderful to help you. The fifth tool that I want to give you is to set achievable goals and strive towards achieving them. Because progress leads to happiness, progress leads to a sense of fulfillment. If you just spend your time, watching Netflix all day, playing video games all day, which, we've all been guilty of at some point, the thing with when you do that is that you're not achieving something substantial. You're not getting any sort of progress in your life. And therefore, I think it's very hard to feel good about yourself if you aren't seeing progress in your life. We are purpose-seeking machines as humans. We are existential beings. We need some sort of purpose in our lives beyond just instant gratification. So if you can set certain goals for yourself, even if it's just waking up at 7 a.m. every morning, exercising for 20 minutes, those are small goals you can set that will definitely help offset the negative symptoms of depression. The sixth tool that I have for you in order to deal with these psychological components is building healthy self-esteem. Grow your self-esteem, and probably it's been proven, I haven't looked at the literature, but definitely if you feel worse about yourself, it's going to be very hard to be happy. It's going to be very hard to get out of your depression if you feel like you are a piece of shit that's worth nothing. What I found, a lot of people with depression struggle with low self-esteem. But depression isn't necessarily caused by low self-esteem, though it can definitely be a contributing factor. I think if you improve your self-esteem, it's definitely going to help with your depression, because when you feel better about yourself, you can make the necessary changes in order to feel better and enter an upward spiral of feeling better in your life and improving your life. For that matter, I think that can help. And my suggestion for that is the 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. amazing book that you can read, and I think it's really going to help with your self-esteem. The next tool I have for you is, as cheesy as it sounds, is as simple as it sounds, practicing gratitude and positive thinking. Now, when you're depressed, it's very easy to, fall into these negative thoughts and all that, and, be incredibly pessimistic. But, I think this tip comes in tension with CBT. If you practice these CBT techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, journaling, as I've explained, it's really going to help you think more positively. On top of that, you might want to look into stoicism. Stoicism teaches you about taking control over your life and not letting the external environment dictate how you feel. Instead, you choose how to react to the negative events that happen to you. Therefore, you think more positively about whatever happens to you, because there's always a silver lining. You can always learn from the worst experiences in your life. And that was the case for me. After I quit my job, I realized that, I feel terrible, but some people, they feel just, they'd be happy to be fired from their jobs. And some people, they'd be happy to, be free. And I realized, what? Quitting my job is fine. It was just sort of this mindset shift that I had. And then this really helped me get out of sort of my depression and all that. And when I quit my job, I just felt incredibly, just so much better. So that's just one example. And the last tip that I have for you to deal with these psychological components of depression is socializing and making relationships, making deep relationships. I think it's an indisputable fact, and it's been proven countlessly through, science and just literature and all that, that making deep connections, really helps with dealing with a low mood, depression. It helps with longevity, with happiness, with health, lower risk of cardiac disease and all that, just by bonding with people, having a close, intimate partner. If you're single, having close friends and all that. So what I recommend is you go out, you meet friends, you get super intimate, especially if the root cause of your depression is that you're lonely, or you have no girlfriend. Then fucking learn how to get these handled in your life. I see so many people who say, oh, I'll never get a girlfriend, I'm not attractive and all that. And they sort of subscribe to this black pill mentality that, they'll always be alone. That's just terrible, because then you're sort of, you're sort of putting yourself in a hole where you want to be happy, but the thing that will make you happy is impossible to achieve, therefore you never get it. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but to get back on the point of socializing, you want to ignore these toxic beliefs. You want to go out there and expand your social circle, expand the people you connect with, connect with people on a deeper level, get vulnerable with them, because these connections will really help with depression. If you don't know what the hell to do in your life, you don't know how to cure your depression, whatever, you feel stuck, go meet a friend, talk about it. You just feel better, period. You just feel better. So do that.